Ken, can you tell me how this feels?
It feels very good.
I feel like we need to get one of these for the office. Like, it's legitimately really cool. Hey guys, this is Austin. This is a Toyota Highlander, and recently I got the opportunity to see something I've always wanted to check out: how a car is actually built. So our friends at Toyota sponsored our trip out to their TMMI plant in Indiana to see exactly how it all comes together. One of my favorite parts is the exoskeleton. So as you can see, not only is it incredibly stylish, but the cool part about it is it gives you a lot of extra lift. So say if you're working on like wiring harnesses or painting, you kind of have your arms lifted above your head for a significant chunk of the day. It actually gives you a lot of lift. In fact, I've got about 6 pounds of lift right now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a fair bit. And especially with Ken with the 10 pound, you can imagine if you were kind of like working with, say, dude, that actually makes a real difference. Like, even just a few extra pounds, like, especially if you're doing this all day long, your arms are gonna get really tired. So even if this just helps like 20, 30% with like a little bit less fatigue at the end of the day, it's totally worth it. Touring through the plant, it's hard not to be struck by just how big everything is. Between the massive robots, the automated little carts that are moving parts around, to just the sheer size of the factory, it's kind of overwhelming. We started our tour by entering the paint shop. Now this place is really hardcore. Even just a little bit of dirt or dust could totally ruin a car. So I donned my super stylish suit, walked through the decontamination room, and got to enter what actually a lot of people don't even get to see. Now, even though it's just called the paint shop, there's a lot more than that going on. So one of my favorite parts is right here. So you'll see that there are a series of 4 robots applying sealant to the underside of these vehicles. Now that's super cool because obviously robots are incredibly precise. You can see they literally, spend what? Probably less than a minute per vehicle applying all of this sealant. However, if you go one station down, you'll see that people are a huge part of this process. So not only are they spot checking everything to make sure it looks fine, but they're also brushing it to make sure it's an even coat, there's nothing that's missed. I think it's a really cool example of just how much the sort of blend of people and technology really does make all of this possible. For certain tasks, robots absolutely make sense, but a lot of other tasks, the people are going to do a much better job, of course be much more thorough about thinking about things versus going like bzz, 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 bzz. Bzz, 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 bzz. Bzz, 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 bzz. Bzz, 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 bzz. That's pretty much what robots do. The scale of the operation really makes sense when you consider that this is a factory which is constantly churning out vehicles. Everything they can do, they have done to optimize efficiency. So whether that means the cars are flying overhead, they're being welded on one side and glued and bonded and painted. There's just stuff going on all the time. But it makes sense because in a matter of just a few hours, you have a bunch of raw materials come in one side of the factory and a fully completed vehicle come out the other side. And this happens non-stop. It's ridiculously cool to watch. So every vehicle goes through an inspection to make sure, of course, things like the lights work and the horn and all that kind of stuff. But then they also go through a water chamber to make sure that there are no leaks. They go on the dyno to make sure the powertrain and everything is working correctly. But then a few vehicles go into further review, AKA the fun stuff. So the first thing we saw was a massive room which can simulate basically hurricane level experiences. So it can absolutely pour water on a vehicle, and this is to make sure that not only it continues to work, but things like the windows and the seals are all working correctly. Now they don't pull every vehicle through here, but they do grab a handful of vehicles every day to make sure that nothing is sort of underperforming as they expect. The same thing goes for the track. So they have a series of different road surfaces that are rough, that are trying to test for not only any suspension issues, but if there's any like weird squeaks or rattles or anything going on. And then last but not least, not only do they take it over a giant hill to make sure that everything is working, but they give it a full speed pass on their private road, which I may or may not have got to ride along with. The entire experience wrapped up with a sneak peek at the 2020 Highlander, which should be going on sale roughly about the time that you're watching this video. Now the interesting part of this is that not only were these some of the very first vehicles that come off the assembly line, but you have to consider that when there's a new vehicle, the entire plant has to kind of start from scratch. Sure, obviously some things can be reused, but generally speaking, you've got a new exterior, you've got a new interior, you've got tons and tons and tons of new parts. And not only do they have to work on the development of these and to design them to work in the vehicle, but also the factory has to figure out how are we going to put them together? In what order should we do this? They have to work out all of the kinks, and they still have to continue making the old one at the same time. It is an incredible logistical challenge, but it's something that I was super excited to check out. That is just a little look at what goes into building a vehicle. I want to give a huge shout out to Toyota for giving us the amazing factory tour. And the next time you see a Highlander or, well, pretty much any Toyota on the road, think for just a second about how much work goes into these vehicles. It really is incredible. Next time I know, I'm gonna appreciate it. I'm gonna be like, oh, look, that was a lot of work. Cars just don't grow on trees, you know? They're built in factories by lots and lots and lots and lots of people.